Bassem Youssef, it struck me while you were talking that indeed you have leveraged the power of new technology and social media. Every revolutionary I meet says to me, look, don't overestimate the power of the technology. This is not really technology. It's about us. It's about God, or it's about democracy. But really, the technology is fascinatingly powerful, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
What do you think about that? What would you say, where does this go? Because once the cork is out of the bottle, the genie is out, where's it going to end?
Well, there's two sides. First of all, 10 years ago, social media didn't have that much of leverage or effect on how things were viewed, but we really have to put it in its own size. It's not a Facebook revolution, it's not a YouTube revolution, it's just part of it, because in Egypt, we only have less than 30% penetration of internet. So you have 70% of the people living out there that doesn't know anything what's going on Facebook. The mistake that people on social media, the social media gurus on Twitter and Facebook, think that if they create a Facebook page, that they will actually change things. It doesn't, because so many, I remember the referendum a year ago when we had the referendum, yes or no on the amendments, and of course the religious groups were advocating for yes, and everybody else, like our generation, was like no. And if you look at Facebook, it's like, oh my God, it's going to be like a 70-30 or an 80-20 no vote. And it was a 78% yes. We were shocked because we had actually to get out of the bubble. Yes, of course, it is a very good aiding tool, but it's not everything. We just have to put it in its own perspective, and we actually have, at the end, to work on the ground. Because the poor person with a kind of a minimal socioeconomic level will listen to the guy who gives him food, who gives him support, who talks to him in the mosque, not the guy behind a screen on a keyboard making Facebook pages.
Sergei Popovic, can I just ask you as well? I mean, in the time since Atpor, helped overthrow Milosevic, I don't even remember having broadband in 2000, to be honest, let alone the social media. How has it changed in the time you've been studying the essential dynamics of these revolutions, people power, as you call it? What has technology done to change it?
Well, in 2000, when we were launching our last campaign against Milosevic, which was named His Finished, and he was finished, we were so happy to discover the small GSM cards which you can put in your laptop, sending 20,000 text messages with no trace. And we thought this is the top of this is how high technology can go. And now don't even the commercial companies advertise that way. It's a little bit expired. There are three things which new media are doing to these movements. First of all, they make things faster and cheaper. So organizing a rally 10 years ago, meaning putting posters, spreading leaflets, going door to door, takes time, takes risk, people get arrested, and of course costs. Then it's like now you make a Facebook group and everybody knows. But I would agree with my Egyptian friend. It's like don't mix tools with substance, because substance is happening in the real world. Second, a very important thing is that the new media really put a price tag on a state-sponsored violence, because everybody is a reporter now, and it was very easy to Assad's father to do the slaughtering home some 20 few years ago, and kill 20,000 people. Now you upload everything. Very important for me is how this knowledge spreads, which is like what Vera was talking about. It's like now the knowledge spread from one group to another very fast. And my big question, because I'm always getting back to this over and over. I had a tremendous session with a resigned British diplomat, Karen Ross, in New York a few months ago, and we were talking what the outsiders can do to help these movements. Okay, we have this refrigerator and we have sanctions and bombing there. Okay, this is what most of the outsiders think about these movements. And what else than that? Educating people is one. Educating 80 people costs like one rocket launcher. So it's like, thinking about the terms of the effect. Then second, what if we can make an application which will efficiently help you to face the oppression and make the oppression backfire? Is it worth investing money? So, there are so many different things from safe communication platforms. One of the beauty of the Skype is that it's very difficult to trace. So technology was backwards, but also surveillance technology was backwards. Now the technology is upwards, and the governments are using powerful technologies to surveil people. So technology is one side of the thing. Education is another side of the thing. But for me, the question of all questions is, what we can do to help these processes without interfering into this. Like empowering people by giving them knowledge, by giving them means to do stuff rather than interfering.
And that's a very weird question to be asking, especially if you're a social or economic historian or just amateur reader of these events. It was not many of the revolutionary events in history that had a business community, a democratic, a pre-existing democratic international diplomatic community that was even asking it the question, how do we help without interfering? I mean, that's something that must be high on the State Department's agenda.
Well, of course it is, but let me point this out, and I'm not saying this just because we're at Google. Look at what Google Ideas did. They understood that there are lessons to be learned from networks around the world. They have built the first platform of its kind, made by a private sector company's money and ideas, to pull together a worldwide network of former extremists, IRA, former Islamists, blah, 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 on and on. How wonderful, how out of the box, how important it is that it wasn't government that did that it was non-government that did that. My challenge to all of you is, what are you going to do? How are you going to think about this? This is about youth. This is about how we think about the next generation. And some of the tools were talked about. There's education, there's leadership training, there's all that kind of thing. But there's also building the platforms that private sector money can do, or the convening that they can do. So it is challenging if it's just government, because we're not the credible voices here.
There are some corporations and even some social thinkers who might say, okay, well, that's fair enough, and it's motherhood and apple pie and great. But almost in every country, in every region, there are large sections of the population that are naysayers. The 20% in France who voted for Marine Le Pen, the 5% in Greece who are voting fascist, the people who are die-hard supporters of Milosevic, and the people in your country to whom Muslim empowerment is not a key attribute they like to hear about. So why should business associate itself with one set of ideas, progressive, democratic, liberal ideas, when large parts of the population don't buy those ideas?
So we're not talking about Muslim empowerment. What we're talking about is that...
You know what I mean, though.
Right. No,
if
but I
you
want
go
to
down
be really
to the southern
clear.
United States and say the word Muslim, you will not,
well,
in some parts, you will not get a great response.
Well, I can push back with you on that. Because there are shrill voices in every part of the world that would agree with what you had to say. But I will say that the vast majority of Americans understand the dignity that is embedded in our Constitution. Okay, so that's one. Yeah. But the second piece is, it isn't about Muslims. It is about understanding across the board how we think about the movement of ideas. And as I said earlier to you, if we are looking at a future and a vision of a world in which we are maximizing robust communities. We're building societies so that it can solve human problems, whether we're talking about HIV/AIDS, we're talking about education, whether we're talking about women. It isn't about Muslims or Christians or Jews or Hindus or Baha'i. We're talking about making sure that everybody is working together on those issues. And if you have 1/4 of humanity that believes that there is an us and a them, how are we going to stop polio eradication?
Absolutely. Bernard Kouchner, let me just throw that one at you as well. I mean, the French ruling political elite hasn't excelled itself, hasn't it, really, in the last 20 years for making correct calls. You yourself said in the Algerian case you were against what happened. The Rwandan case is a case in point. What, you know, could this just all be a flash in the pan? And could we, in some way, go back to the world, the old political elite knew before all this happened, before it became possible for corporations to ally themselves with democratic and liberal values?
Coming back to this world, no, certainly not. But having a clear view on the future, this is also very difficult, very difficult. And so we were talking mainly about Egypt. Egypt is a very good example, a better example than the other countries. Sorry to say, but in Libya, when the new government announced that they were following the Sharia, we were not very happy. So this is difficult. What about Yemen, where more or less they were supporting Saleh and a sort of escape, a free escape, etc.? What about the main problem in between Shiism and Sunnitism? Yeah. This is facing us, facing them. So don't believe that because of Google, thank for Google, we have solve the whole problem. Certainly not. Better to talk to each other, better to know that we are all together for the knowledge, but we also have to express our views in election. We were talking about election, because the presidential election is just coming in Egypt, etc. So we have not solved the problem. We're talking about HIV/AIDS. Yes, this is what about demography? What about poverty? Poverty is a remaining problem with Google or without Google. Certainly, it will be better to know about and to share our view and to share our resources, certainly. So is there a French view on that? Well, I don't want to criticize my country, but it was not clear, neither in your country, the position facing the coming of the Arab Spring. Not so clear. And we changed our mind, and we invited the Gaddafis, and we bombed Gaddafi, etc., etc. So, hey, it's a bit of a contradiction.
We did that as well.
Sort of. So don't believe that we'll solve the problem only with a better communication.
Huh? You have to get croissant. That's somewhere to start from. You have the pâtisserie. It's like French.
Okay.
I love it. It's
Okay.
like, you can solve the problem.
It benefits
by
to you,
apparently. Of course, yes.
Bassam Youssef, I was going to bring you in at that point. I mean, what
croissant?
What is your fear now? I mean, for your own country, it is the centre of the process that's been unleashed. It has huge resources, a huge population, and it's physically in the centre of the Middle East. What's the perspective now?
Well, you know, as long as it's a democratic process where we are allowed to actually elect and choose without any external interference, I have great hopes. My only fear is that there will be some sort of a unity between military fascism and religious fascism. That's the worst thing that could happen to anybody. I mean, I'm not afraid, like when people tell Egypt is going to become Saudi Arabia, it's going to become Iran, it's going to become Afghanistan. No, we're not going to become like that. The only problem is if we actually become something like Pakistan. If the military makes some sort of a deal with the radical Islamic movement and they will actually give them some sort of a protection so they can actually do or impose their extremist agenda. If the religious powers are left for their own and they're left to actually deal with the real issues on the ground, people will actually decide for themselves who to choose. Actually, 2-3 months after the parliament elections, almost half of the people who voted for Islamic power said they're not going to vote for them again because they have failed on so many economic issues. So just leave it to free fall. And everything will sort itself out. Just like don't get the military in and don't get external powers in. That's it.
Sergei Popovich, your manual for non-violent revolution was done.
It's behind you.
Yes. There it is. Was downloaded, as you say, in Iran during what is called the Green Revolution. It was called, by the Washington Post at the time, the Twitter Revolution, rather optimistically, since only 1,000 people in Iran at the time had Twitter accounts. Nevertheless, one was, as a journalist, able to follow it quite accurately by following those 1,000 people. Let me ask you, though, about Iran. What do you think? We've been through this iteration of successful revolutions, networked revolutions. People in Egypt did, by a combination of mass force and ingenuity, what the Iranians were not able to do. What do you think now for Iran?
Well, I think the rules are the same, and I don't think we should focus too much on Twitter and social networks. There are reasons why the these revolutions have 3 phases, and this is exactly what my friend from Egypt said. The one sexy we look at is, bringing the bad guy down. And then we need to prevent a coup. And then we need to build up democracy. And it's a slow process. So don't stick to the first one. Looking at Iran, comparing to the other countries, you can look at the many successful and unsuccessful cases. And, you look at the unsuccessful stalemates in places like Zimbabwe or Belarus or Iran. And it's more comparable because when the opposition forces this youth movement doesn't have the unity, for example, all the Twitter in the world will not help. If they don't plan, if they don't have a strategy, if they don't come out with a clear tactics, then all the networking doesn't come out. And then if they don't have nonviolent discipline, which is very important, and somehow slip into violence, they lose credibility, they give government every reason for a crackdown. So it's about the unity, planning, nonviolent discipline. And yes, it is very nice if they can put a little bit of Twitter as a strawberry on the top of this story. This is really finding their vision of tomorrow altogether, rather than just tweeting.
Sergei Popovich, Farah Pandit, Bernard Kouchner, and Bassem Youssef, thank you very much.